Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Elgin, and today we're diving into the hot topic of aging HDB flats, especially in light of the recent news on changes to the HDB en bloc scheme. So if you're thinking of buying or selling an older HDB flat, there are some key factors to take note of before you make that move. Stay tuned to find out what to look out for and how to make the smartest decision. So if you find the content useful, to help to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. It would be really very helpful and very much appreciated. Thank you. And we'll be covering 7 points in today's video. The first will be the latest updates on the HDB resale market. Number 2, financing limitations for aging flats. Number 3, common issues with the older flats. Number 4, stabilizing HDB resale prices. Number 5, we will compare newer and older HDB resale flats, especially on their prices and what their future value might look like after 30 years or even 40 years. And number 6, we will discuss what are the exit strategies for aging flats. And number 7, we will conclude the video with some food for thought. So right after National Day, the Minister for National Development actually announced measures to tackle the rising prices of public housing. So there are 2 pieces of significant news. The first news is that they will not be using SERS to en bloc the older flats, but instead implement VERS, which is the Voluntary Early Redevelopment Scheme, to address the issue of over 300,000 aging flats that were built between 1960 and 1980. So the main difference between SERS and VERS are that SERS is compulsory acquisition of the flats, whereas VERS is voluntary and will be decided by the majority of the residents. So the compensation for SERS is also more generous as compared to VERS. So the last exercise took place in 2022 when they acquired 4 blocks of flats in Ang Mo Kio Avenue 3. So the acquisition was likely due to the construction of the Cross Island Line. At the point of acquisition, the flats were only 43 years old, so I guess at that time, there will still be quite a fair bit of the first owners, the original owners who were still staying there. So some of the affected residents, obviously, they were unhappy. First reason was that, having been uprooted from their home where they stayed in for decades, and they were already familiar with the neighborhood and they didn't really want to move. So number 2 was that, having to top up like $100,000 for a new flat when many of them were retirees. From this experience, the government probably decided that, it'll be better to let the residents decide for themselves if they want to relocate to a newer flat or stay put until the lease runs out. So that is when VERS will come in, because VERS will require at least 80% of the residents in the precinct to decide. And then, these flats also have to reach a minimum age of 70 years old. And the minister also re-emphasized that they discourage young home buyers from purchasing older properties with shorter leases, as these properties will not last them for life. So they have continued to put in place, financing restrictions on loans and CPF usage, so that young buyers will at least think twice before they buy an older flat. Flats will also undergo a second round of HIP at the 6th-year mark, so this will be more extensive than the first round of HIP because they want to make sure that the flats will be, at least well maintained and can last until the lease runs out. And the land will be returned to the state after the lease expires. So will there be compensation when the lease expires? I don't think so. These are some of the financing limitations when it comes to buying properties with shorter leases. So basically, the shorter the lease, the more cash the buyer has to fork out. And this really kicks in when the lease has less than 60 years remaining. And for properties with 30 years lease or less remaining, a bank loan may be impossible. And the remaining lease for HDB flats must be more than 20 years to qualify for HDB loan and CPF usage. So you might want to take note of that, especially, if you're looking to sell or buy your HDB flat. So this is one of the common financing limitation, which is on the CPF usage. So the rule of thumb for this guideline is that the remaining lease of the flat should cover the youngest buyer until age 95. An example of CPF usage for older flats, let's say this couple, both of them are 32 years old, they want to purchase a three-room flat in Block 118 Toa Payoh, and the purchase price is 361,000. Lease commenced in 1968. So they will be 74 years old when the lease expires. And in this case, this couple can use up to 180,000 from their CPF OA accounts to fund the purchase. Aside from the usual renovations for older flats, you might want to take note of some of the problems that are starting to surface for these aging flats, such as the spalling concrete. Alright, do paint your ceilings regularly, seal any holes or cracks promptly and properly, and to ensure sufficient ventilation. And also for electrical wiring, it is good to change the circuitry once every 25 years. Buyers of older HDB flats are likely to have done a complete renovation of the flat before they shift in. So when HIP comes knocking on their doors, they are likely to opt out of the HIP due to the amount of inconvenience and that their flat is just recently renovated. But based on this homeowner's experience, it might be a better idea to just opt in for HIP to prevent any potential leakage issues later on, because these problems don't always surface immediately. So in these cases, the owners had opted out of HIP and the problems only surfaced a year after HIP was completed. Besides VERS, the second piece of news was that the government announced 55,000 BTO flats will be launched for sale in the coming years, and another 56,000 new flats will also hit MOP in the next few years. So they expect that the upcoming supply will absorb the current and future demand in order to tame any increase in housing prices. So the first announcement will put an end to speculation on SERS and further discourage home buyers from buying aging flats. So this will then push them to consider the BTO launches and the newer MOP flats, which will help to retain value better than the older flats. So we shall look into the lease decay issue further later on. So would this be an end to the rise in HDB prices? I would think so. This is the HDB Resale Price Index for the past 25 years. So from this chart, it clearly shows that we have exceeded the previous market peak by 50 points and by 70 points when the prices last bottomed out in 2020. And this is unsustainable if the growth is left unchecked. Prices started an uptrend from 2007 till 2013 and later went into a gradual decline until the first quarter of 2020. So I remember that when we exited the COVID-19 circuit breaker, flats started to fly off the shelves. No matter what kind of unit you were selling, whether it faced the rubbish chute or whether you're on a low floor or you had the direct west sun, the units just get sold within hours. Everyone brought forward their housing plans. Those who were renting, they decided to purchase. Everybody needed more space. And this pandemic-induced demand was so powerful that it reversed the 7-year decline in prices in only just 1 year. And then prices continued to climb 54% to exceed the last market peak in 2013. So I believe we might be at the market peak ready and prices might stabilize or behave in a similar trend from 2013 to 2020. The other question is, did prices of aging flats then behave in a similar fashion? Did their prices in 2022 to 2025 exceed that in 2013? Let's look at it. So these are the statistics for three-room flats at Block 118 Toa Payoh. So the flats there are about 52 years old now. The resale flat prices started to rise in 2010, leading to a market peak in 2013 at $398,000. So the highest price recorded in this market peak was $388,000 in February 2023. So no, prices did not exceed the previous market peak and it did not behave in the similar trend as the broader market. So similarly, an older HDB block of 47 years old, three-room flats in Block 327 Clementi. So during the previous market peak, the highest was $515,000 and the recent highest price recorded was $520,000 in April 2024. So this exceeded the last market peak by only 5,000. So it's still very similar to 2013 prices. So next, these are prices for a 23-year-old flat in Buangkok Crescent, 5-room flats. In 2013, the resale price hit 546,000, and most of the transacted prices between 2022 and 2025, they have easily exceeded the last market peak, with the highest at 670,000, which is $130,000 difference in prices. Next, these are transacted prices for a 22-year-old flat in Bukit Panjang. This time is 4-room flats. Again, last market peak prices hit 510K, while in this cycle, the highest was $603,000, a $90,000 difference. So I think from these data sets, we can conclude that the younger flats do perform better than the older flats in a bull market. If aging flats were to undergo VERS from 2030 onwards, what would their potential values be? So let's use the closest thing that we can find as a reference, which is the BALA's curve from SLA, to help to give us an estimate. It is quite apparent from the BALA's curve that as the property gets older, the rate of depreciation is also larger. So for young property starting from 99 years of lease right until the 60-year mark, the decline is only 16%, whereas as it gets older, from the 60-year to 30-year mark, the decline increases to 20%. And that really accelerates from the 30-year mark to the 15-year mark, right? You see a decline of 20% over half of the period in 15 years. So let's use BALA's curve and apply to newer and older HDB flats, and let's see what is the effect on the depreciation rate. So in this table, let's look at the first two blocks in Clementi. Both are within 5 minutes walk to Clementi MRT. One is a 13-year-old block and the other a 47-year-old block. Both are 4-room flats. Their remaining leases are about 34 years apart. So for the newer flat, you see the PSF is much higher at $1,089. We are also using the average transacted prices for the 4-room flats there. So age is 13 years old, and based on the simple annual cost, actually the difference is only less than $1,000 per year. Right, so if we revert back to their freehold values based on the BALA's curve from SLA, all right, the newer flat will be around 1.167 million, and the older flat will be $833,000. So value after 30 years, the newer flat would be 909,000, and the older flat would be 205,000. And in percentage wise, the younger flat suffered a decline of 16%, while the older flat is almost double at 33%. So after 40 years, okay, the younger flat has a percentage loss of 22%, while the older flat has a loss of 54%. And if you look at this block in Toa Payoh with a remaining lease of 42 years, the loss in value after 30 years was almost 51%, much higher than the other two blocks. And after 40 years, the Toa Payoh flat will lose almost 90% of its value, because it will have a remaining lease of just 2 years. So older flats will suffer larger declines in value as lease decay advances, which means it will exceed its cost per lease year. So these are some of the exit strategies for older flats. Of course, the first one, SERS, this is no longer applicable now, or at least, HDB will not consider using this option to en bloc the older flats. Okay, so just ignore this. So VERS will only be offered when the flats reach at least 70 years in age, and it allows owners of aging flats to sell their property back to HDB. However, do note that it requires 80% of the owners in the estate to agree, and the compensation will be lower than SERS. So definitely, I think the government has to make sure that the SERS scheme will be accepted by the residents, because they do need to kind of manage these older flats out in an orderly fashion, so that they are able to slowly and gradually rejuvenate the older estates. The third option is the lease buyback scheme. All owners must reach the minimum age of 65 years old. At least one owner must be a Singapore citizen, gross monthly household income of less than 14,000, and at least 20 years of remaining lease. This lets you sell the tail end of your HDB lease back to HDB in exchange for retirement funds into your CPF account. So the fourth option is to rent out your spare rooms or the entire unit. So you have to fulfill MOP to rent out the entire unit for standard flats. So for plus prime flats and PR owners, they are not allowed to rent out their entire flat at all times. So renting out or spare rooms are only allowed for 3-room and larger flats. Actually, this is a very good option to rent out your spare rooms. So especially if you are single and you are considering buying an older 3-room flat, you can actually rent out the spare bedroom, and I believe it should be able to cover your monthly installment. Number 5, of course, if you are staying in an older flat right now, you can consider applying for a new flat. Fulfill your MOP if you have taken grants or you purchase your flat directly from HDB. So for families, you can apply for a new BTO, and for senior folks, you can consider downsizing to a smaller 2-room flexi flat. Alright, do note that, of course, for older flats, there will be a smaller pool of buyers due to the lesser flexibility for CPF and loan usage. To conclude, here is some food for thought. Do plan your retirement goals, or if you are doing legacy planning and you do intend to leave your property for your future generation, you might have to rethink your plans again, because now aging flats will no longer be compulsory acquired by the government. Instead, it will be on a voluntary basis. So at least 80% of the residents in the estate must agree to relocate before they compensate you with a newer flat. And if they don't, then you have to stay put until your lease runs out, and your potential buyer pool will be very limited due to the restrictions in CPF and loan usage. And do note that the recent rise from 2021 to the current market peak was really pandemic induced due to disruptions in both housing supply in both public and private markets. So can you really afford to wait for another upturn? The newer and older flats, they do cater to different groups of buyers. So even though you're staying in an older flat and you're looking to sell, do not worry, because there will still be a market for your flat, just that the market is smaller. For example, lower quantum older flats will appeal to those who take a rental mindset, as buying these flats are more affordable compared to renting one in the open market. And it also gives them flexibility, to go on holidays or invest their salaries into other kind of assets. And finally, this is a comparison table between older and newer flats. So overall quantum, older flat will be lower. Cost per lease year, older flat. Rental yield, older flat will have a higher rental yield. CPF and loan flexibility, newer flat, obviously. Renovation cost, your newer flat would typically have a lower cost, as you don't really have to go through a gut renovation. You might be able to retain the flooring, electrical, wiring, things like that. Alright, exit strategy, newer flat, because there will be a larger pool of buyers. And for long-term value, as we have shown earlier, the newer flat is able to retain value better and do better, when there is a market upturn. So if you're planning your next property move and you need a consultation, do feel free to reach out to me at my number over here. And if you like the content so far, do help to give the video a like and do subscribe to the channel. You'll be very much appreciated. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.
So I think 99 years is a well-known concept in Singapore, public or private housing, because if all land in Singapore becomes freehold, I think in the end, down the road, it will be very hard to assure future generations about keeping housing affordable. The ones who will benefit will be today's landowners and their children. But new generations who don't have housing bequeathed to them will find it very, very hard to have access to affordable housing. And the government will find it very difficult to redevelop and rejuvenate older areas, given our limited land size. In the end of the 99-year lease, whether it's a private condo or whether it's HDB flat, yes, they have to be returned to the state. Everyone understands that. 99 years is in fact a very long time. It's more than enough for any individual. So in fact, if you buy a flat as a young couple or as a young single, you will have more than enough value in the flat through the 99 years. Later on, when you reach retirement, to unlock the value of the flat and still have value to monetize for your retirement.